Jambo, everybody. Welcome to Jambo Dr. Akumbu podcast, bringing you cultural relevant, multifaceted conversations and reflections intersecting education, entertainment, and business with a commitment to DEIB and cultural capacity building. It's been a while. Yes, I have been busy doing other things, writing, finishing papers for conferences and for publishing. So about 3 papers or 4 papers. Those stuff kept me busy and creating a tea brand, which I will tell you more about in the end. Our guest today is Dean Chalak Richards, our legal expert on DMV related stuff, and I wanted us to dig deep into the affirmative action ruling that we received, and it's been turning our country a little bit upside down. And I really want us to dive in. I want us to dive in and share with you how we feel about it, and what are our feelings that are grounded in truth, and what are the truth that are in the ruling itself. So she would look at the ruling and she would maybe say, Ruth, you're feeling this way, but it's not really like that, and all of that. And then we can all learn together. So I think it's going to be a wonderful episode. We're going to talk about Juneteenth and tie Juneteenth to the affirmative action. So the key point I want to make here is between Juneteenth and affirmative action is that information is power. So even though there is a ruling, it's important to know what's in the ruling. So we know that Juneteenth is as a result of the group in Texas, the group of African Americans in Texas that did not get the information that slavery has been abolished for 2 years. So because of that, we know that once information is not given, people turn to live in ignorance and in bondage. So now we want to be sure to give you information and make sure you have what you need to do moving forward based on the ruling. What is the ruling? What's in the ruling? How can we move forward with this ruling? So now let's welcome Dean Richards. Jambo, Dean Richards.
Jambo, Dr. Akumbu, Jambo.
Oh, Jambo, it's great to see you again. It's been a while.
It has, but it's always good to see you.
It is always great to see you. Any great things you've been doing lately beside the great work you're doing with Pepperdine University?
Oh, I had the honor a couple of weeks ago of being with the National Black Law Students Association. I'm on their Alumni Advisory Council, and so I got to spend some time with their leadership about a week or two ago, their incoming student leadership, and they're doing amazing work, and it was just such an honor to be with them.
Oh, that is so great. And you said a couple of weeks ago?
Yes.
Oh, that is so great. That kind of like it ties into our conversation today, right? Like it's gonna
Absolutely.
Be like that, and then coming out of that and being hit with affirmative action. So yeah, it's like our topic today. We're going to touch a little bit on Juneteenth, and then we're going to address a little bit of what's happening in the country that is literally shaking up the whole place, the affirmative action. So how did you enjoy Juneteenth this year?
It was good. I say to people all the time, I think it's an honor as a non-American, right, to be able to celebrate with Black Americans the significance of Juneteenth. And I think it does tie into even some, the Supreme Court decisions that have come down recently. But really what Juneteenth means is that people had freedoms that they were not made aware of. And really that thought about what it means for justice to be delayed, for people not to have their freedoms enforced, I think carries eternal resonance with us. And so it's a holiday, a celebration for particularly Black Texans, but Black Americans, right? But it's something that we can universally, particularly as people in the African diaspora, we can universally connect with.
Right. I totally I'm in that same space with you as an immigrant. There is so much I didn't know, and just being able to learn and understand and just see the power of information and information not received on time, and then people
Mhm.
continuing to live in a state that is continuously bonding without even realizing that they are free, right?
Mhm.
So it's that power of how do you get information to people to a way that frees their minds. And it made me think about the things that I said maybe as an immigrant when I came to this
Mm.
country, that because I didn't have the depth of knowledge of what the African American has gone through, I could blab my mouth and say some things until I receive enough information to know different. Or people in the diaspora that might just not know certain information which are easy to come to them, that if they know that information might change their life in a certain way. In general, how is information delayed or justly delayed just dragging down not just Black people in America or Black people globally? So that's kind of like the space I was in on that day. And I watched the show on TV, and they brought in an African to play on the show, which was nice. It was nice to see how we're not just making this about America, we're also creating a space for the diaspora in general. So Juneteenth has become now Black diaspora celebration instead of just a Texan thing and an African American thing. So I appreciate you bringing that perspective.
Of course, I said to last year I was honored. The university asked me to write a message on Juneteenth, and in it I reflected on a trip. If you'll indulge me, that the law school brings students on, and we bring students each March break through our Newbar Institute for Law, Religion, and Ethics, and my office, the Office of Community Belonging, Law School Community Belonging. We bring students to Montgomery, Alabama, and to the National Memorial and Museum for Faith and Justice. And so, I'm sorry, I think it's Peace and Justice,
Peace be
but
just.
it's the one started by the Equal Justice Initiative with Brian Stevenson. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to see it,
I
but
have not. We talked about it at one point, and I was like,
yes,
to go. Maybe when you take your class next time, I should
yes.
tag along.
You should come. It's powerful. But what I reflected on there was that the first time I went very much with an outsider's perspective, right? I'm wearing the shirt. I graduated from Spelman College. So I had knowledge, but it was very like, this isn't my history. These aren't my people. And then when I was there and I was looking at the names that are on each of they replicate tombs in the memorial for Black Americans who were killed, who were murdered during that post-Reconstruction timeframe. And I was going through there and looking at the names and, just contemplating, but again, very much like an outsider's perspective. This isn't my history. And I paused at one and I saw the name that was the same as one of my uncles. The exact same first, middle, and last name.
What?
And of course, it wasn't him,
Yeah,
right?
but
But it immediately, and it arrested me. Like I immediately stopped. I had a visceral reaction. I knew intellectually that it wasn't him, but I took out my phone and called my mother immediately because I called him and I couldn't get him. And I called my mother and I said, "You've got to get me him. I've got to talk to him." And the memorial says how the reason why some of them were killed. And that particular uncle, he is married to a white woman, and that man was killed for being with a white woman. So it just
wow.
arrested me, like it literally stopped me. And I called my mom and I said, "You've got to get him. Is he okay?" Like, and she was like, "What is going on?" And I was crying, and and I'm leading students through this, right? It's not just me. They're looking at me like, "Is Dean
What?
Richards okay? What's going on?"
Yeah.
And immediately, again, I knew intellectually it wasn't him. This is someone who died in like 1927, right? Like, but what it immediately did was give me the feeling that family members, the friends, the loved ones of those people on those tombs
Mm-hmm.
must have experienced when their loved ones were taken from them. And I think, and so last year when I wrote my Juneteenth message, I shared that to say we have the danger as even as Black people, those in the diaspora, but non-Americans or non-Texans, of
Mm-hmm.
approaching Juneteenth the way I approach those memorials,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's sad, it's interesting, we're empathetic, we're respectful, but when it grabs you,
Yeah.
then I have a whole different experience with
Mm-hmm.
that memorial now than I ever would have had I not happened to stop at that particular tomb out of the thousands of names they have listed
Exactly.
and see that one. And so I challenged last year our community. I continue to challenge myself to find ourselves in Juneteenth, right? As members of the diaspora, the unfortunate shared existence of people across the diaspora is that none of us have been untouched by colonialism, by white supremacy, by brutality, by racial superiority,
Yeah.
right? By the violence, both physical, mental, emotional,
Cultural.
spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
cultural, that comes from that. None of us have been untouched. And so
Yeah.
if we look at Juneteenth that way and think about where do we find our freedom?
Yes.
How
Yeah.
do we walk into it?
Yes.
How do we celebrate it? How do we, instead of making it, Juneteenth could be a bitter day for many people. We were kept in slavery for an extra 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we turn it to a celebration the way this was
Mm-hmm.
done? You
Yes.
know?
Yes. Yes. I love that you said none of us have been untouched,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the thing is, especially first generation Africans, especially us, right? We think when we come to the continent, to this continent, we think, oh, we were not descendants of slaves, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
arrogance that comes with, oh, we do not relate because we were not descendants of slaves, right? But the truth is, to a certain degree, we have suffered the consequences of our ancestors being taken from our continent,
Mm-hmm.
generation of brain drain, labor drain, power drain was just from the continent in through slavery. And then the effect is we were left with almost nothing on the
Mm-hmm.
continent. And then secondly, we got our tribes and territory partitioned, and all of a sudden our tribes are bonded in small countries. You see a tribe and then you see the same tribe in another country. All of that have negative impact on people. All of a sudden, we are countries fighting each other. Meanwhile, we were one big tribe. So it's like and then, for example, like the French being in this paternalism, and
Mm-hmm.
paternalism was simply the French looking at African countries as their father, and we had to be like just do everything the French did, like that assimilation, that complete assimilation, and that kind of made us put our cultures away. So we think we were not impacted. We have been impacted greatly by all of these things, just in a different way.
Yeah,
So it's what you said is such a great perspective to come with when we celebrate anything that has to do with the struggles of the African American in the United States.
absolutely. Absolutely. We can all, um, it is a particular and also a universal experience,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And I think we can uh, celebrate and support the particulars as
yes,
well as find the
yes,
universal experience. And
yes,
something you just said about the same tribe of people being pulled apart and all of a sudden fighting each other,
mhm,
that is a concern I have now, right? That we find ourselves being pitted against one another and saying, well, well, you're not really because you're not from here. Well, you're not really because you don't know this. Well,
mhm,
when instead, if we paused, we could recognize
mhm.
that I don't like to use the violence of like a war analogy,
Yeah.
so maybe a team, right? We can recognize we're all on the same team. We
Mhm.
are all, in fact, in the exact same game.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in a war, we're all fighting the same battle. We're just at different points
The
along
battlefield.
along the battlefield. And
Yeah.
instead of having ourselves turned on each other,
Mm-hmm.
what would it look like in this world if we actually came together? If
Mm-hmm.
we said, you've got this skill, you've got this skill, there are so many advantages
Mm-hmm.
that people from the Caribbean or people from the African continent may bring with mindset. And there's a resilience of spirit, there's a fortitude that Black Americans bring.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Right? And if we put that all together,
Mm-hmm.
what would that look like? The creativity
Mm-hmm.
that Black Americans have had. You mentioned it, where Black Americans, I think, the world is celebrating 50 years of hip hop, which
Mm-hmm.
is not without its Caribbean influences, its African influences, right? That could be representative of what it would look like for all of us to come together.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine how powerful the things we could do, the inventions, the approaches, the democracies, right? All the things we could do
Yeah, yeah.
united.
Right. Yeah, yeah. You like the hip hop. I watched that.
Mhm.
That was really cool to see how something that came from the streets became national culture, right? And
Mhm.
then when with the Juneteenth celebration on one major network station, which I don't think I can repeat, I could maybe, I'm not sure. On that station, it's they brought this. I was like, okay, what if we could do more of that, where we bring
Mhm.
in all these people that are great talents from across the diaspora and do things together like that.
Mhm.
Let the experience, we come and celebrate your experience, but we're celebrating all of our experience. You know how somebody has a
Yeah.
baby and we all go celebrate that baby? It's almost like it's all our baby. We go
Yes.
celebrate with them. Somebody cry, we all go celebrate with them and cry with them and mourn with them. So if we can bring back that cultural mentality of celebrating with each other, we're not taking away from you what your experiences were. We're trying to celebrate with you. And then when it's our turn to celebrate something, you come celebrate with us and keep our community going. Like I
Yeah.
really, really enjoyed seeing that they brought in an African for Juneteenth celebration. And I hope they could do more, bring in people from South America, bring in people from, I don't know, France and other regions of the world where we have a Black people. There's an interesting thing that somebody said that there is that Black people, if you put us all from all walks of life, we make a majority of the world.
Mhm.
But in reality, because we're so divided,
Mhm.
like the tribal thing that we just talked about, like you're so broken apart that you feel like you're the minority all the time. But when we all come together, we are a majority. And there is so much that we have, so much talent, like you said, there's so much that we can bring all our resources together and our skills together to really create a big change in our community and for the world at large. Because once we're making ourselves better, we're making it better not just for us, but for the entire global society we're going to serve. So that said, how
Let's take a deep breath.
like
Whew.
how do we tie this conversation to affirmative action? Can you just, as a legal expert, can you just tell me what you felt when it happened? How everything we're talking about fits in? Just talk to me.
You know, I think on a broader scale, what we see and what connects the idea of celebrating Juneteenth and 2 weeks later, getting this news from the Supreme Court, unfortunately, I think part of it is that the feeling that history just continues,
Mm,
right? And so think historically for a moment, if we put Juneteenth in historical context, where we are now in historical context.
mhm.
Historically, the various acts, the 14th Amendment, which the court, I think, ironically uses to undo equality, what was created to bring
Exactly.
forth Black equality, right? But that
Exactly.
arose following the Civil War, within around the years that Juneteenth was in fact started, right? June 19th. Um, and was put in place because of the recognition that just sort of waving a wand and saying you're free, go, did not fix the systemic issues
Yes.
that were at place. And so the various things that came from that, one of which included in the 1960s, following Brown v. Board, following the Civil Rights Act, the idea that various forms of society, here in particular, we're focused on education with this decision, needed to take affirmative steps, progressive steps. So the idea that it's not reactive, but we are moving forward to make what in Brown 2, Justice Marshall and others throughout the years would call to make the promise of Brown a reality. The promise that we would not have segregated education, the promise that the power of higher education, education in general, but higher education in this context, was open to all, regardless of skin color, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of background, that the court then recognized that that could not be done if people, if systems, if institutions were not taking the steps necessary to create the playing field. Because as Justice Jackson does really powerfully, and both Justice Sotomayor and Jackson in their dissents, very powerfully trace the history and the impact, the societal impact of the evils of slavery, the evils of colonialism that we were talking about, to start and set up why at the point of applying for higher education, which is the genesis of this, Black people, and this is very particular, this decision to Black people, Black people are not at that same starting field. So it's saying all other things being equal, yes, you could remove race-conscious admissions because all other things would be equal. But in the reality in which we live, which Justices Sotomayor and Jackson acknowledge, all other things are not equal, right? In the United States, Black children are more likely than not, I believe the figure is something around 70%, to be in an underfunded school district.
Yes.
We saw very tragically news that brought to light again the health impacts, particularly Black maternal health. We know that Black people, and again, I'm just repeating what Justice Jackson says much more eloquently, face higher rates of health impact decisions, that our pain is dismissed. We are not as likely to be seen by a doctor. We know that Black children are less likely to have equal access to food and water. I think it's something like 30% more Black children have lead poisoning in their blood, right? Less likely to be in communities where they can get a good night's sleep, where they are not over-policed. And so when you just start there, when you think about access to testing training, to private tutors for those SATs, we recognize that one person's 4.0 and the other person's 4.0 are not the same.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
We recognize that.
Yep.
One, and that is not to, and they are very careful to say, particularly in this dissents, none of this undermines what other people have done to be competitive applicants for higher education. We are not taking away from the hard work, because getting a 4.0 or 4.5 or whatever those scales are now, it is hard work.
It is tedious work.
Hard work, regardless of the family that you come from, regardless of your background, it is very hard. What race-conscious admissions does is allow the admissions officer to consider context, historical and particular, in order to ensure that the Black person who may have a 3.5, still a competitive applicant, is put in context of their high school, put in context of the historical implications, so that, because again, when we think about special consideration for admissions, that includes, as the court in the majority opinion notes, that includes things like musical ability, that includes athletic ability, a special athletic recruit, that includes legacy admissions, that includes donors to the schools. One factor among numerous others was race.
Yeah.
And so it is very curious that no one is saying remove the advantage for legacy admissions, remove the advantage for athletics, remove the advantage for donors, right?
Yeah.
So when you ask me, there's that sort of broader context, but all of that went through my mind when the opinion was first announced.
Right.
And most people in the legal community, the broader community, knew what the opinion was likely to be
Yeah.
in this court.
Right.
So very few people had hope or illusions that it was not going to be what
That.
we received.
Yeah.
So we were braced for it, but that
Yes.
doesn't take away the impact of it, right?
Yes.
It's like when you're coming up and you see a car accident sort of happening in front of you. I've been in car accidents before. I was walking across the street and got hit by a car.
Oh my gosh.
And in that moment, like the split second before it happens, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm about to get hit by this car. So you know it's coming. It doesn't stop it from hurting.
Exactly. Like you still feel the pain, even though you see it. You're like, damn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit of what this was. We were braced for it. People had started thinking about what will we do? How will we maintain our goals? But that doesn't stop it from hurting.
Right.
And, I think for me, the biggest pain, that most immediate visceral reaction was that the court dignified the belief that the only reason Black people could be in a position is because of this, right? And, it, I think, makes painful for so many people where the assumption is made that you could not possibly be worthy, that you have to continuously prove yourself.
Yeah.
And a little bit of that is the point Justice Thomas has been trying to make for years, and this is me trying to give him some grace. I'm trying to give him some grace, right? However I may feel, I'm trying to give a little grace.
Yes.
Where he has said that affirmative action for many years, going back to his dissents in Fisher 1 and Fisher 2, right? And Grutter and Gratz, he's said for years that he feels that affirmative action puts a stain on its beneficiaries because people assume they are not there because they belong there.
Right.
My response to him is that stain goes back to what we were talking about. It goes all the way back to Juneteenth. That stain goes back to the belief that many people have that Black people across the diaspora are inherently inferior, right? So the idea here is we're not going to take that into account.
Right.
And that the assumption behind it, for those students represented by the Students for Fair Admissions, which, as I believe as Justice Sotomayor points out, was started by Abigail Fisher and her father, who was the plaintiff in Fisher v. Texas all those years ago, which was another attempt to undermine affirmative action. So she is not without her own personal animus. And then her claim was, if that Black person is in there, there's no way they could deserve it. I'm supposed to have that spot, and they took it from me.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And now they found other people, and it's very sad that they found other people of color to see that. Because you're not saying, well, that athlete shouldn't be there, they took my spot from me. That legacy shouldn't be there, they took my spot from me. You are saying Black people do not deserve to be in this space.
Yeah.
We don't want you here. I'm sorry, I've gone on my soapbox.
No, you're good. No, you're good. You're good. I am at the point of tears, and I'm holding back tears, right? Like, the hurt for me is real, right? When especially there's a key things that you've said. The fact that you work really hard, given all your everything else, and you still are being looked as undeserving. That hurts me deep. Why? Because I run a nonprofit. I worked a full-time job with the worst hours. I finished school with 7 degrees in 9 years, from community college with my PhD, while doing all of this and helping family. And I don't think I have anything less than a 3.5 in any of my transcripts. But if somebody looks at me, the first thing they're going to conclude, if I'm in a position, is that I am there because of my color, and especially because I am a supporter of DEIB. It's all of a sudden I'm going to be judged as in you don't deserve to be here. I know the sweat and blood I put in. I know the debt I have carried to be where I am. And for somebody to say I'm undeserving is unfair. And I don't think that, personally, affirmative action for me is saying that I have worked my tailbone off and somebody is refusing to open the door for me, and affirmative action is helping that person open the door for me. So
Yeah.
I can at least be in the room and prove that I can work hard. I can do what I need to do. And for you to shut the door, close, after I have worked so hard and followed promises that you made that, oh, I'm going to be better. I'm going to do better by you and all of that. Then I get to the door and you slam the door right on my face. That's beside all the biases that we have to face as women and Black women. So that's beside all of that. And then the second thing that brings me to real point of tears is the fact that it's like minorities are classified in groups. You're here as a minority. There's this other minority and there's this other minority, which is why affirmative, like no affirmative action, some people that do not support DEIB, they've argued that when we start grouping ourselves as minorities, and then they will keep grouping us. Because why is it that it's a minority that was put forth to help destroy something that helps another minority? Right? So those things are questions that they just boil me down. And you're the legal expert here. I'm just going on an emotional ramp because I feel hurt right inside.
Well, I think one of the things is that and I was on a webinar on Friday that many people very much smarter than I in the legal community were speaking on. And we talked about the practical impact, right? And that there are a couple of carve-outs potentially that the majority opinion left that, admissions offices and so on, we can try to figure out. So there are people saying, well, listen, it's actually not as bad as everyone feels like it is.
Okay.
And perhaps it's not. That person pointed out, and I found comfort in it as well, that Justice Thomas's opinion, which goes the furthest in a lot of arguments that are viscerally abhorrent to many people, particularly people of color, he wrote it alone. No one joined him in it, meaning he's sort of standing out on that alone. And they took a couple of his arguments from dissents he's written over the years, but they didn't embrace it fully. And so people are saying, okay, that can be a little bit of a sign of hope, right? But as important is the expressive impact. And that's what we're talking about right now. That's what the larger society was reacting to.
Right.
Is it strictly accurate to say affirmative action is dead? No. If you read the opinion, it's not strictly accurate. Is it accurate to say that's how many people feel?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. And that narrative is quite important because the argument is that there's so many things that have continued over the years, not because they were legal, but because of the narrative that follows it. So if you continue to build on a negative narrative, then people are going to act on that narrative. So even though it's not as bad and we can see loopholes, like one of the questions I wanted to ask you is like, okay, after we've done this emotional vamp, what are some of the loopholes, or not loopholes, what did they leave us with? For example, they said in the military, you can still have that you can still go by color, and some people are taking offense to that, like, oh, we're good to go die at war and we're not good to go into schools, right? So it's like people are taking offense to that they left the military to be able to consider race and gender, so, or women, Blacks and women. It's like it's a bit complex, so it's like one really has to like break these things down. Like you said, even the experts are still breaking it down. And for me, it's just like, okay, how can we change the narrative? Is there anything in that thing, in the whole legal document that helps the narrative and make it better for me as a Black person? Because I feel like the narrative is actually worse than the legal ruling.
So I'm going to start negative and then move positive, okay? Because I'm so sorry, but I think
It's okay. Let's just get it and then get it out.
yeah, it's important to put this in context, right?
Yeah.
This opinion, this ruling does not come in a vacuum.
Yes.
So, and I think that's what's hard for people is in the past month, maybe we have seen bills in Florida and in Texas, which have removed funding for DEIB work, which have removed curricula from, schools, which have in effect punished people, right?
Yes.
Across the board. We have sustained really probably, I would say honestly, since 2008, when President Obama was first elected, we've seen slowly increasing attacks on the concept of Black excellence, right? Which have felt like they've culminated in the past couple of years. And certainly, even Justice Brown Jackson's confirmation hearings last year brought a lot of those to play for people.
Yes.
So this opinion is not operating in a vacuum. And one of the things it seems to do is lend credence to this idea. And Justice Thomas actually explicitly says that an 18 or 19-year-old now, a white 18 or 19-year-old now, should not be held responsible for the actions of the past, which is an argument that we've heard several times over the last few years, that teaching accurate history, because this is just accurate history,
yeah,
is causing feelings of guilt and shame and trying to hold white people born now responsible for the actions of white people in 1852 or something, right? And that is inaccurate, right? What it's doing is saying this is history.
Yes.
We have to understand history. We have to teach the Reconstruction era appropriately to avoid slipping back into Jim Crow. And so part of the despair that I think people are feeling with this decision is that it feels as if it's giving the opportunity, or let me say this, it's removing a defense that we had against slipping back into that era. Because many people are looking and saying, whoa, the court has gutted the Voting Rights Act, has feel like, although they had a decent opinion a few weeks ago, a ruling on drawing congressional districts at the local, state, and federal level, but is feeling like a lot of the things that have shown that we've progressed a country as a society, even globally, are being removed.
Right.
And so that's where this opinion is sitting, where people are also having that reaction, right? Now, and we're talking about particularly the affirmative action case, but there's also the Baker case that came out, the website designer. I'm sorry, the Baker case was several years ago, right? And so people are putting this in that context, that this court and several, it feels like, administrations have taken steps to move us away from the progress and feeling like, well, what can we do to continue progress marching forward, which is where your question is coming from.
Right.
So I think it's fair and it's right for people to sit in despair. I will say this decision was released Thursday evening. I did not read it right away because I read synopses, I read the syllabus, and I said, oh, this is not going to go well for me, and I need to take care of myself. I'm not in the emotional place to do this right now.
Right, exactly.
And we have to honor that visceral reaction, the emotions that you and I feel as people who are constantly asked to prove ourselves, who are constantly disrespected, who are constantly questioned, right? My expertise is not taken for granted. The way my white male counterpart's expertise is taken for granted. He is assumed to be worthy of his position. No one asks him, what were your degrees? What have been your years in practice? Have you read this? Have you done that? They assume he should be in his role. They question my decisions. And this gives credence to that. And so it's right for us to have these reactions. It's then right for us to say, well, how do we fight? What do we do? You know? And so one of the things that the court lays out, and this is very particular to higher ed, but I think it's important for, I know you have business leaders, nonprofits, et cetera. One of the things the majority opinion points out, which I think Justice Sotomayor rightly sort of counters, but they point out, is that an issue they had with race conscious admissions, because again, affirmative action as it pertains to gender, as it pertains to other things, has not been undermined, only race conscious admissions.
Okay. That's important to know, right? Because
no, this was not challenging saying there are too many women.
Right.
It was
to
not
challenge that. Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
particularly race conscious admissions.
Right.
And so one of the things the court points out is that the compelling interests, which are necessary if there's a race-based or any type of 14th Amendment violation, the state or the entity has to show that it's a compelling interest that they need to move forward. That the compelling interest here, namely the benefit of diversity, was not quantifiable. There was no way to measure whether or not any progress had been made. So one of the things the court said was, well, how do we know that you're making progress? How do we know as well? Number two was that there was no idea of an end date. So they reference a case Grutter, which said, we hope or we assume that in 25 years, race conscious admissions would no longer be necessary because society would come to a point of equality. The court now says that 25 years would have been 2028. None of the parties here are saying we're any closer to it, which means this could go on indefinitely. There's no end date here. That's the second thing that the court had issue with, right? And so part of that, the difficulty with it being measurable, is the court has previously said we can't have quotas. So you can't say we need 5% Black people, 7% Asian, 15% Hispanic, right? So
Yes.
how do I measure if I can't have layout? My response to that is what many DEIB professionals, myself included, have been saying for several years, if not decades, which is we need to use data.
Yeah.
And that we can measure the idea of belonging. We can measure inclusion.
Yes.
We can measure the educational impact of diversity. So some of it, I think, makes our type of work, Dr. Akumbu, even more necessary.
Yes.
We can be statisticians. We can do focus groups. We can do climate surveys. And we can compare our data throughout the years.
Yes.
We can measure educational output. We can look at whether or not students enter college in freshman year, and by the time they graduate in senior year, 4 or 5 years, has their train of thought progressed? Have they become more critical thinkers? Are they more nuanced? Do they have the ability to grapple with ideas and cultures and ideologies that are beyond theirs? Those are measurable things.
I agree.
Where the challenge to us now is to design programs that measure that, so that we can then say to admissions or hiring or whoever, here is why this is necessary. We have noticed that when there are less people from X background, this drops.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one of the things that gets to the court. The second is the idea of benchmarking. This idea that they wanted to know, well, when will we know we've achieved what you want? Because we can't use quotas, right? If we benchmark and say our goal is that not that we have 42% minority, but that we've achieved whatever number on this climate survey. And when we've achieved that number, we will then feel like we've achieved our goal, and we need that number for X years continuing. Well, now we've created something that can have end goal points.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that gets to one of the other issues that the court raised. Something that they said particularly, and I'm just looking down at my notes here from the opinion, right at the end of the majority of opinion, the court says that, quote, nothing in this opinion should be construed as prohibiting universities from considering an applicant's discussion of how race affected his or her life, be it through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise. And they give some examples of that. Okay. They do say you can't just use this as a proxy for race. But that means, for example, that we can create optional statements in various applications that prompt, and certainly we'll have to put real thought into what that looks like, but that prompt students, applicants, to, for example, speak to how that student's unique ability to contribute to the educational culture, the intellectual experience of the university or whatever else, is influenced by their life experience. And perhaps we say life experience may include things like your
Your
race,
race.
your national origin, your immigrant experience, your socioeconomic status, your geographic location, and lay your sexual orientation, whatever it may be. We can lay out various things that we know serve as measures of diversity, your religious experience, et cetera, and give a prompt for candidates to be able to explain how where they are in life is measurably impacted and what that will mean for the institution to which they are applying. So I won't call them loopholes, but I will say that there are opportunities for us to reframe and to think and to build nuance into it. The other thing I will say is what both Justice Jackson and Justice Sotomayor and both of their decisions on a positive note, that being that as a society, and particularly as we were talking about earlier for Black people, this is not the first attempt to hold us back. Justice Sotomayor actually ends her dissenting opinion quoting Dr. Martin Luther King, that the arc of the universe bends towards justice and that we will continue marching on.
Yes.
And so, like I told my kind of Instagram audience this week, right, when it was just the emotional response.
Yes.
We have to feel the pain. We have to sort of, lick our wounds, but we also have to recognize that all this means is it's time to gird up.
Yes.
And some of that is pipeline programming. Some of it is thinking even further back. Okay, well then how do we prepare students starting from elementary, middle school, high school to get to university? The unfortunate thing is that this puts the burden back on the student, right? Where we were trying to take a societal and institutional approach to remedying the systemic impacts of racism and injustice, the court has in some ways forestalled that and put it back on the student in that statement to be able to draw those connections. But I think that says to us as, maybe the elder siblings in those communities is now those students need us more than ever to read those optional statements. They need us to be supporting their educational journey. They need us to come alongside them and help them craft something and review it and edit and give suggestions. They need your nonprofits. They need others that are particularly geared towards admissions preparation because it becomes even more important. And because we know, to something you said earlier, I'm sorry, I'm so on my soapbox, but I just have to get this out.
I want you to get it out.
Okay. That the illusion that Justice Thomas and others raise is the idea that anyone of our skin color who gained admission to these institutions was by objective measures inferior, right? The assumption that the white student or the Asian student needed a 4.0 and these schools were letting in students with a 2.5. That's objectively untrue.
Yeah, that's not
I will say that from an institution of higher education, particularly in the law school, we have standards to meet.
Yeah, high standards.
High standards. We have median GPAs to keep up.
Yes.
We have, for us, LSAT scores to keep up, right? You're not letting in someone with a 2.0.
No way.
And the rest of your class has a 4.0. It was never going to happen.
No way.
Never going to happen.
No way.
So the idea that the Black student was walking around the hallways and came from a 1.9 and was barely scraping by and everyone else had to be perfect in order to get in, we know that's not true. It's not true.
That's not true.
Affirmative action, I'll take your analogy even further. You said, affirmative action opened the door for you to walk in. All I'm going to say is affirmative action, race-conscious admissions turned the key in the door. You still had to get dressed, walk up to the door, find the right thing, turn the doorknob, step across the door frame, and introduce yourself. Right? All it did was literally unlock something. You had to do everything else to get there. And so now
I think
we are behooved. I'm so sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good.
Where the court might be giving license for some people to lock that door back and make it
There we
more
go.
difficult. Because we did have Black people in these institutions before, right? We've seen that they were exceptions. I think one of the decisions points out that for UNC, Harvard and UNC were the two schools at issue here. For UNC, after they opened in 1975, they opened up space to Black students. There was an average of 3 Black students in the university per year. People found ways to get in. That's not the point, right?
That's not the
The
point.
point
And then
was-
already you're pointing me to a quarter, which you say I can use quarter.
Mhm. Exactly. So, the next steps, there are some practical things that the court has pointed out. It hasn't even been a weekend and we're in a holiday long weekend. And I know I myself have 3 different, Zooms scheduled over the next 3 weeks with experts from all over where we're trying to figure out, well, what does this mean? What do we do? How can we, how do we craft statements? How do we, and unfortunately, how do we prepare ourselves for litigation? Because one of the things Justice Sotomayor pointed out in a note is that what this will do is open the space for now going forward, every student who did not get in to say, well, it's not fair. I should have been in, but this person got in instead, right?
Yeah.
And so what we have to do both within and without the educational enterprise is we are now being called to be even more supportive of our young people.
Right.
To come around them as a community, like we were saying, whether they are from the United States, whether they are from Jamaica, Trinidad, Nigeria, Egypt, France, England, right? To come around them and to create our own systems of support, which is part of why I wear my HBCU t-shirt.
Yes.
Everyone. We can't take everyone. Schools are small, historically underfunded compared to, predominantly white institutions.
Yeah.
But HBCUs were founded to create educational opportunities for Black people.
Yeah.
They are not second choice or second class. I chose Spelman over many other institutions, and I'm proud of it. But we are recognizing now that there is a call to support those institutions and to support our Black students who choose to go elsewhere.
I love that. See, I love that because I was having a conversation with another lady yesterday, and we went to this idea, and I was just like, okay, now that I have blah my emotional thing, like just the same way I said to you, what else? What can we do? What can we do moving forward? Can we make sure that our schools like Spelman are fully funded? Can we make sure that our public schools, where we are in Black neighborhoods or in minority neighborhoods, are fully funded, well equipped, have resources and teachers? We can't keep depending on others to constantly help us. We have to rally up as community to meet the challenges of our time. And how can we do that? Does it require for us to pay teachers, other Black teachers, more so that they can go work in this community? What will it take? Resources. It boils down to resources. The same as in Africa, there's like, oh, we need resources for students in the school. It's the same as in the United States. We need resources for students in the schools.
Yeah.
So especially in the minority neighborhoods, we need these resources, because if we can equip our students correctly, I actually want to proceed that people that are not Black will want to come to our schools. If we can bring up our schools and provide the resources and make it challenging, like Spelman is not a school that you just walk into. It's
absolutely not.
Right? You don't just walk into. I'm sure the white kids that will be like, I love to go to Spelman, right? So it's like we need to get our schools to a place where a Harvard will be nothing. It will be like people that are going to Harvard want to come to us. So it seems like they're pushing the door so far to our faces that we almost want to go back and create this bubble. And once you do that and we start protecting our own, people are going to be like, oh, you're being racist. You're not letting us in. You're being racist. You're not letting us in. But it's like we're doing this because we constantly being knocked down. Every time we try to rise, we're constantly being knocked down. So if we're going to constantly be knocked down, then we need to develop our own. We need to support our community. We need to support our children. We need to support our applicants. If they want to go to somebody still wants to go to Harvard, how do you help them to get into Harvard with all these hurdles now that we have to overcome? The burden, like you said, is back on us. Back on us. And I love your idea of research. I love the idea of research. I know that you mentioned quite a few things, but the idea of research stood out to me. Why? Because I think I have maybe 2 papers that one, I think one has accepted as a poster, one has been accepted, it's not published. One that is published, I put it out there, but it was accepted at a conference and it will be published by Springer, I think. And that paper, yeah, I'm excited, super excited about that paper. That paper looks at how US kids are impacted by collaborating with kids from a group of African countries. Not like people say, oh, those are studies that have been done. No, those studies have not been done. We don't show how our Black culture impacts the other side. We always see, oh, this foreign culture came in and did this and did that and did that. What did we do? So I did a reverse study where I looked at K-12. I used data from Pepperdine University IC4 project. I was an RA there, so it was they let me use their data, use my models on that data just to measure the impact, right? And there was evidence that US kids, who were mostly white kids, were impacted by the African kids from like 3 African countries. You could see the impact so big. So, well, maybe not super big, but there's evidence there which shows that there's need for more research. So like you were saying, the courts have a point there. If we cannot use quarters, there are other measures that we can use. And we need to start using those measures. Not necessarily to show that, oh, we're good enough to be in Harvard, because we're already good enough. It doesn't matter what who says. We're already good enough to be in Harvard. So we do it so that we can show evidence and change the narrative. Because for me, my tears today were not because of, oh, the door has been shut and knocked and we can never get in. No, it's more like the narrative that we are inferior continue to persist, right? And I understand that some of the justices were saying that no, it's if we do that, if we admit them through affirmative action, then it means that we're saying that they weren't good enough to be there. That's not the truth. That's not the truth. We all know that, and we've already established that in the show today, that it's not the truth. But at the same time, we need to have those evidence in place, because sometimes evidence is the only thing that will shut some people up. And with scientists, with higher ed people, we need to start producing this evidence.
Yeah. You know, the last thing that we need to do, and it's something you just said, which I will say that I think is something that, you know, we were talking earlier about the different strengths others in the diaspora can bring together. I think is something, I can only speak from my experience, that Jamaicans will bring to the diaspra, is a fierce pride in ourselves, right? And
because Nigerians,
you will never tell us that we are inferior. We refuse to believe it, right? We're little but we tell along. That's our like, feel how you feel.
Yeah.
We will trace anything good back to Jamaica. And my point with that, and part of, you know, my experience with being at Spelman, which I think is some of the importance of HBCUs that I didn't realize until after I graduated and went to a PWI for law school, is that there is a difference, and I'm tying this together, I promise. There's a difference in being in a place where, like Pepperdine, for example, they say, oh my goodness, we want you to belong. And so what do we have to do to create a space for you to belong? Versus being in a place that was created for you in mind.
Yes.
Right? Oh, wow. Two different things.
Yeah.
Spelman was created with me, obviously not exactly me in 1891, but with me as a Black woman in mind. Everything there is geared towards my success.
Yes.
They don't have to create, which puts a sense of pride in me, which takes away that feeling that sits in the back of many of our minds when we go into predominantly white spaces that we already talked about having to prove yourself. I did not have to prove myself to anybody. They knew I was there because I deserved to be there, which gave me a freedom to be intellectually curious, which gave me a freedom and my friends to think through and wrestle with and think about different political ideologies or whatever, right? For me, it married well with my Jamaicanness that refused to accept, because of how I was raised, that there's nowhere I should not be.
Right.
You know? And I think that one of the things, and you're talking about that emotive impact, that I would love to see even more in Black Americans, which is a historical product of being descendants of enslaved people. And I want to point that out. This is not the fault of Black Americans.
Right.
Though, Jamaicans, enslaved people were dropped off across the Caribbean as well.
Right.
But I want to point this out, though, is there's a sense of cultural pride.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine the day when someone says to a Black American, well, you're not supposed to be here. And the response is not, let me prove it. The response is, well, you don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
Because that's my response. You're not supposed to be. I'm like, well, obviously you are delusional. And I'm not going to waste my time reciting my credentials. I'm just going to do my job.
Right.
You'll figure it out eventually. The power in that, in media training, they say not dignifying the question. I can answer your question, or I can say I'm not even going to dignify that with a response. Like the premise of your question is inherently inferior. It makes me think of President Obama, where when he was running for election, he was constantly challenged to prove his nationality, to provide his birth certificate, to provide his LSAT scores, to provide his transcripts. And they did not dignify he was like, it would have been very easy to be like, oh, here's my birth certificate and prove it. But that dignifies the idea that there's no way that I could qualify.
Yes.
By proving it, I am dignifying your question.
Yes.
And imagine if the response to this ruling is, this hurts, but it enraged me. It wasn't so much that I was hurt as I was angry. How dare you say that I don't belong here? Mm-hmm. I am better than you. That's the Jamaican in me. I'm actually better than you. You're welcome that I let you be around me. Like, you should be thanking me that I decided to be with you. And I just think about the power of that type of response, right? Yeah. For Black Americans to say, do you know all that we have put up with in your country? You're welcome that we still even want to participate. Mm-hmm. You're welcome that we want to go to your school. Mm-hmm. You're welcome that I'm bringing my cultural heritage. You are swimming in pain and talking about grit and resilience and all these things. We have a culture of grit and resilience. Black Americans have a culture of resilience.
That's so true. I respect Black Americans for that. Like, my highest respect is what they have been through and what they are still able to give to the world after everything they've been through. I have the highest respect for Black Americans.
They have a culture of grace.
Yes.
That is, I think, because Jamaicans, we have anger. We will cut you in a second. Black Americans have this culture of grace, right? And forgiveness, which truly baffles me sometimes. And I think it's very much God-given. And so imagine standing in that.
Yeah.
Not dignifying the premise of the question, but instead saying, we bring all of this to the table. And how sad for you that you don't seem to want it.
Yeah.
And so that to me is some of the hope that comes out, right? The Justice Sotomayor quoting, we continue to march on. His truth is marching on. We shall overcome. That is saying, you tried to hold us back. We found a way before. We will continue to find a way now.
Amen. And on that note, Jambo,
Dr.
We're not giving up. We will continue. And thank you so much for this deep dive. I always like to bring the emotional, because when we see things like that, we don't read the fine lines. We get emotional, and it's good that we created this space for people to just hear our emotional part, response to it, how we felt, if it was rightfully or wrongfully grounded, but how we felt and how we think we need to proceed. Thank you for doing the reading and for digging in and for being my legal expert on the show. I really appreciate you. And thank you for making the time and taking the time today to be with me and with everybody to just make this a little bit more bearable and clearer. And if you learn more things in the future, we should dig deep again. We have other sessions coming up, so we can always continue this conversation on that note.
Absolutely. Thank you for creating this space for so many. You are a blessing to our community. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. We thank God for that. All right. Have a wonderful day, and we will talk soon.
Yes.
So what a great session today with Dean Richards, Chalak Richards. She is a joy, isn't she? And I love that we can just dig deep and talk and not feel unsafe. And we hope that by being authentic, bringing our authentic true selves to all of you, we are helping you deal with the emotions of things as they are. And at the same time, putting up your thinking hat and figuring, how do I support my community moving forward? My community being all the Black people in America and in the diaspora. How do we come together to support them and help them and promote their narratives instead of the narratives that were written for us? So, on that note, I want to tell you I've been working on a brand called Ntento. Ntento simply means unity or together. And I am starting with teas, herbal teas from the African diaspora. So a lot of it is going to be based on my heritage. And I bring to you herbs that I grew up on, and some of those herbs which we would drink for different reasons. And then I bring to you, with time, herbs from other countries like Jamaica, where Dean Chalak is from. So I'm really excited about the brand. I'm finishing up 3 products on the line right now, and I'm hoping to get that out really soon. So look out for Ntento. It's just tsente.com. The website is not up yet, but it will be up soon, or at least a page. But there will be an Etsy account, and you can always contact me directly if you want to try my tea. And it's called Tender Afro Herbs and Teas for now. We really want to bring Africa and the African diaspora to the world, right? Because the narratives are just not that great. And I believe that I have a rich culture. I believe that I am blessed because of where I grew up, and I'm also blessed because of where I live. And I have this opportunity to bridge my childhood with my adulthood, and the place that I live today and the place that I grew up, and just the experiences that people like me have gone through their teas and through the herbs, and eventually maybe hair products and oils, right? So I'm excited about the line, and I look forward to sharing more with you. Until then, asante asana.